Indianapolis, if Jim Irsay is cagey like a fox, this is not a bad plan. Install somebody with a zero experience midway through the season. You're at 3-5-1. If you lose out or maybe win one of your final 8 games, you're in the driver's seat for a top 3 pick. And in this upcoming NFL draft, you have 3 particular QBs that are very, very high on draft boards. Bryce Young at Alabama, C.J. Stroud at Ohio State, Will Levis at Kentucky. So if you lose out and you end up at 3-13-1, might be the number 1 pick. If you only win 1 more game, 2 more games, you're certainly right there in the top 5 for one of those 3 quarterbacks. And as we all know, the biggest problem in Indianapolis since Andrew Luck retired is the rotating door, the saloon doors at quarterback. So if this is a play where you fire Frank Reich, you install a guy with no experience, basically hoping that your team goes down the toilet the rest of the way, you have yanked Matt Ryan, and so now Sam Ehlinger is starting, and you've given Ehlinger 3 different offensive coordinators. And since Reich was the one calling the plays and you've already fired the previous OC, there's nobody currently on the Colts staff that has ever called a play for the Colts this season. You've actually done significant damage to your hopes the rest of the way. And if you're hoping for, you know what, we'll put Ehlinger in there because he stinks and he's going to take all the beating. We're not going to have to pay Matt Ryan next year because he won't get injured. We don't have to risk that. We have no real head coach there, and we can lose games, and then I get my quarterback in the draft, and we reshuffle everything in the offseason. All right, that's not a bad idea. The problem is I don't think Jim Irsay thinks that. I think Irsay is reactionary. Irsay kind of just does and says what's on his mind, as evidenced by the Daniel Snyder stuff. And I think Jim Irsay is a little bit of a crackpot. I think he's like Dollar General Al Davis. So here's the real bit. It might work, despite it not even being the plan. But let me just say, the idea of hiring an NFL head coach that has zero experience as, a coach is so ridiculous, it's almost impressive. All of Jeff Saturday's former colleagues at ESPN were trying not to say this is ludicrous, but it is. Because what other billion-dollar operation hires a person with the zero experience at leadership and installs them as the CEO? Could you imagine if FedEx said, oh, yeah, you were a really good driver in Memphis for 13 years. In fact, you were like one of the best drivers we've ever had in this region. You were like a top-end driver at FedEx for like more than a decade. It's really impressive. And I've seen some of your Instagram posts about FedEx. Sounds like you know what you're talking about. Would you like to be the CEO? Would be like, what? And they were like, yeah, I mean, you'll need to know about global markets, warehouse logistics, employee retention, marketing resources, but I'm sure you'll figure that out. We'd like you to be the CEO of FedEx. We like your gumption. You seem like a real special guy. The business world, the financial world, the stock market, all of these CNBC people, et cetera, would be like, what the hell is FedEx doing? They hired a driver to be the CEO. That is what is happening here. They just took a guy that played on the team that kind of looks and sounds like maybe he might know something and said, and now you'll run everything. And we don't do this anywhere else. Except in sports, it's like, well, it's just sports. And Jim Irsay said that. I mean, the game hasn't changed. We're not building rocket ships. He said the game hasn't changed since 1962. I mean, what planet are you living on where maybe you need a rocket ship to say the game hasn't changed since 1962? In 1962, most fans got their information from listening to the games on the radio or going to the games. We don't even have national distribution of television football in 1962. In 1962, we were barely integrated as a league. In 1962, there was no Super Bowl. There was no traveling media for the Super Bowl. There were no commissioner press conferences. There was no red zone and luxury suites. There was no salary cap. There was no draft that's nationally televised by 3 networks. There was no crazy intense pressure because it's a billion-dollar enterprise. In 1962, you took a guy who was a FedEx driver and said, you can be our quarterback this week. I mean, you just can't believe it, but you can, because there's this incredible oversimplification sometimes in sports of, well, it's just sports. Do you know how hard it is to balance an entire organization in today's sports world? I mean, it's beyond what you can even conceptualize. Now, you want to say, well, outsource this, outsource that. He won't have to call the plays. He won't have to do this. Okay, fine. And maybe there's a simplification you can make where, you know, you end up being a bit of a rah-rah guy and you get everybody excited about Sunday and you're not really responsible for any of the schemes or the game plans or the film work. But you know what happens to those guys? They don't make good head coaches. Look at the Lions. And Dan Campbell has experience as a coach. He's been a head coach and a longtime assistant coach. I mean, it's so stupid it might work, but this is so stupid. And I love the panel discussion on ESPN because he was just working for him on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, over the weekend. And they're like, well, I mean, you know, he's high energy guy and, you know, everybody really loves him. Well, okay. Like, then hire Chris Farley for your head coach. God rest his soul. He's a high energy guy. People really like him. People really like talking football with him. Great. Hire Frank Caliendo. What? That's what made the decision as a head coach. Like, they can't say it's stupid because he's their friend and he was working with them on Thursday. But it's crazy. I mean, even Jeff Saturday said, I'm shocked. You're shocked. You're the guy that got the job. It's like if somebody came into the office after the show at 10:05 Eastern and said, DA, we're elevating you to president of Odyssey. Would you like the job? And I'm like, didn't see it coming, but yes. What's the salary again? Yeah, I guess I'll do that. And then they held a press conference and every shareholder was like, what the hell? And I was like, yeah, look, I'm just as shocked as you guys, but I'll try it on for size. I mean, I've been a talk show host. I mean, like, the business world would have collapsed. What? You're giving $1 billion enterprise to a guy that's never held a position in the executive order? You know, people like talking radio with him. High energy, good guy. People like working for him. You know, How hard could radio be? Nothing's changed since 1962. Except everything. It's so great. It's just so great because it's so stupid.